Oh, 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 oh. Yes, hello, tankers and tankettes, and welcome to the Derp Oho, just doing Derp Oho things. Yes, that shell was, of course, guided by the tentacle, the tail of Jabba the Hutt himself, and so we have a very silly start to this video. Now things are going to get slightly more serious with this game. This is Redman 36 in the Rheinmetall Borsig. And this is a slightly older game. This is 9.15. So this is while he was still playing World of Tanks a lot more than he is now. But I decided to reach back slightly to show this one because it's going to be a very good match. It's also the only full tanks replay I have for you today. I've actually been... I've had a lot more Warships replays submitted from Patreon supporters recently. So we might see a lot more Warships replays in these supporter spotlight games generally, which means longer videos. Hooray! Well, it's good for you, but it's more work for me, and I'm lazy, so you know, yay. Anyway, so this is the 12.8 centimeter gun. It's a top tier match. It's a very tier 8 match, in fact, and there's a lot of tank destroyers on this team as well, which might work against this team. It means they have fewer hit points and less armor, even if they've got some very good guns on their side. And in on a map like this, Runeberg, where there is at least a component of city fighting, that could be quite telling, because the enemy team's got quite a few heavy tanks. Now, they do have some armor themselves. They've got an IS-5 and a KV-4, but that's it, really. There's also a KV-2 who, well, he probably doesn't care that much, but he's the only regular tier 6. In fact, I think he's the only tier 6. Everything else is either a tier 5 or a tier 7 scout. And there's a tier 7 arty on each team as well, and then the rest is all tier 8. Now, with that gun, of course, you don't care so much, but the matchmaking might make you a little mad. So, lines up a shot on the ELC and manages to take him out. It's a nice thing about this gun is that it can take out those tier 5 scouts in one go. Of course, the big derpy gun can as well, with its 750 alpha, but it's a little harder to hit at range. It's rather less reliable. So they've lost about a third of the team already. That armor advantage is showing in the town already, and they've also lost a couple on the field. So that's not so good. And of course, with the Borsig having the armor, or rather the lack of armor that it does, it's not like Redman can afford to rush to the front lines and start tanking the damage. He's also got not that many shells overall, so he's got to be a bit careful about wasting shots as well. So the enemy team are pressing their advantage in the town. Redman's turned around to try and help, and he can actually do so relatively safely from this position. He could potentially get shot from down there, but unless they start pushing around in force, he can at least sit back here and try and help out his teammates. But as you can see, while that... did I say IS-5? No, it's an IS-5. No, it's an IS-6. It's... Okay, on the preview, it kind of looks like IS-5 on the team list, but then I look at the minimap and it says IS-6 for sure, so okay, never mind. The IS-6 is rather badly beaten up, is what I was going to say, and I just realised it wasn't an IS-5 at all. Anyway, so... Redman, he's decided to turn around again because there's an... Was that an Su-152? Yes, it is. He's the last thing left alive over there, apart from Artie, who's already taken a hit. So, with those enemy tanks pushing now over the east side of the map, Redman can maybe get some shots. And obviously, this is for his own good as much as the team's good, because if a bunch of tanks come running up behind him, he's not going to last all that long. He's only got 1100 hit points. So that's the Type 59 and the ISU down. There was a Rheinmetall spotted on that side as well, but he hasn't been seen for a little while, and we won't see him for a little while yet either. So this means Redman can turn his attention back to what's happening in the city. And what's happening in the city is he's got 2 allies left alive. The IS-6 is hanging grimly on. There's an Su-101 back there who is probably trying to... I imagine he's at least semi behind a pile of rubble and trying to keep his hull hidden and just showing his superstructure. He's also got a pretty good DPM, but he's only got, I believe, a 100mm gun. So it's not exactly scary firepower. So that Oho pushes forwards, and even though Redman is in the open, this guy's not paying attention. However, doesn't reload in time to get the kill. He does, however, get that kill, so that's quite nice. So the SU-101 takes out the 4 hit point Oho, and that just leaves the entire rest of the enemy team. So this is about to get interesting. Very, very interesting indeed. There is one other tank left alive. It's that SU-152. Now, if you look from the minimap, you'll note that that enemy Rhinotaur was actually spotted coming up behind, or I say behind Redman. He's coming up in this direction, and Redman kind of has to rely on the SU to protect his back here. If that enemy Rhinotaur has the big gun and so decides to fire HE at Redman, for instance, that could be, I think, potentially a one-shot. I'm not 100% certain about that, but if it doesn't one-shot him, it will severely damage him. So that's his first damage taken. The IS-6 just drives past. Takes a big hit in the process, though, so that was not a terrible trade. The Ag Tiger 8.8 pulls out, but he's a one-shot, so that's fine. It pretty much just is the IS-6 and the 5100 that are the biggest threats here, and the IS-6 decided to take the hit so he could flank the SU-101, who seems to have dug himself in. Meanwhile, the Rhinotaur's making a move. Looks like he's making a play for the SU-152. Redman gets in another hit, and hopefully that means the SU can finish him off, but sadly that's not the case. So if Redman wants this guy dead, he's going to have to do it himself. He's also got, however, things in front of him to worry about. The IS-6 might be about to pop out, and the 5100 looks like he's coming around this way as well. So there's the IS-6, who knows he's still there, but I think Redman was unspotted at that point. Yep, there we go. So the Sixth Sense does pop up. So the IS-6 is dead. The Rhinotaur is aiming. That could have been nasty. It could have been a one-shot either way, but if it was the big gun, maybe he was still aiming, because that thing doesn't have a particularly good aim time. Redman is also running premium food on this, so that is going to give him just that edge. So that had to have been a very hairy moment for Redman, because with being spotted firing at the IS-6, there was every chance that the enemy Rhinotaur rather, was going to blat him from behind. But I don't know, maybe the guy just had his gun pointed in the wrong direction, or maybe because he had the derpy gun, it actually worked out. So that leaves enemy artillery and the 5100. Now Redman potentially can survive one 5100 hit. The SU cannot. Of course, equally the 5100 might roll high and just outright kill him, and the artillery, being artillery and this being a Rhinotaur, is also a very big threat. So I think Redman is feeling a little indecisive at this stage. He's maybe not quite knowing what to do, because this is a very, very knife edge situation. So what he does decide to do, and I've sped it up a bit, is actually reposition, because we know they're both in the cap circle. Now he takes a very roundabout route here. There is time, and I think the SU-101 is waiting on him getting into position. But Redman, I mean, he doesn't really pull that far out, so he isn't able to get a shot here. Now, fortunately for him, oh, here comes the AMX. Oh, that bounce! Oh, a bounce on an AMX 5100. It doesn't get spotted though, but still, that is pretty poor RNG. But having said poor RNG, the SU-101 got in one shot into the artillery before he died, and it set the arty on fire. So this is now a 1 versus 1. So that's one of those instances of RNG going both ways. This could be over already. If that shell had not bounced, the 5100 would be dead and the match would be over. But as it is, he's still got this guy to deal with. So the good news is 5100 doesn't have a lot of armor, and hopefully, you know, if RNG doesn't troll him again, he should be able to just easily take this guy out with one hit. The bad news is the 5100 is faster than he is and has a clip. So if he high rolls, he could one-shot, as I've said. And if Redman, if he gets the drop on Redman, if Redman is caught unawares, he could get, even if it takes 2 shots, it's an auto-loader. He's got those 2 shots available in very rapid succession. So he really does have to come out from an unexpected direction here. There isn't a lot of time to play with, however. We're down to under 3 minutes. So it all comes down to this. He's taking the gamble that the 5100 won't be looking in this direction, and even if he is, hopefully he can survive the hit. So, hopefully, he will not get spotted, and oh, there we go. But the 5100 is looking this way, does take a hit. Fortunately, it isn't enough to kill him, and he is able to secure the win with that very tense ending. So it really did all come down to that final shot, and even though the 5100 did get away a hit, I think it was a low roll. So there we are. That was his ace tanker, or an ace tanker. I think he's aced this thing multiple times over. It was one of his favourite vehicles when he was playing World of Tanks more regularly. So nearly 1500 base XP, over 5000 damage done, top gun and high caliber. So, I think all in all, it would be fair to say that was a carry, because you compare Redman's damage and everyone else's damage and the XP he got as a result. It was a bit of a gap there. It's not like the rest of the team did nothing at all, but Redman was at the top of that team for a reason. So, on to the Warships replays, and I suppose I'll wave a goodbye to everybody that's leaving that just came here for the tanks, because I know a lot of people only watch the tanks and they don't stick around for the Warships necessarily, but I try to make the Warships ones entertaining for those that don't necessarily play the games themselves, and both of the following replays are going to be, I hope, quite entertaining. So this is Darnith in the now tier 6 Hatsuharu. And as you glimpsed from the loading screen, he's very bottom tier. This is a rather tier 8 game. So this is not great. The Hatsu doesn't have great guns, doesn't have especially great torpedoes. They're quite slow. The machine itself is not the fastest or most maneuverable or anything like that, but it is at least relatively stealthy. Although with patch 0.6.0, of course, even that has been degraded to some extent because the RPF skill has come along. And the chances are reasonably decent, especially at the higher tiers, that somebody on the enemy team will have it. So, 3 versus 1 against this Sims. The Mayhan is just completely charging in gung-ho. I should mention, by the way, baby, this is a 5.16 replay, so this is before RPF. Just, in case anyone was wondering. Anyway, yeah, so the Mayhan's charging in and immediately gets a face full of torpedoes, but he at least gets a torp into the Sims in return. So that guy is now wounded, and it's still 2 versus 1. However, the Mayhan was a bit, I don't know, I think that was a bit too gung-ho. I think that was giving away too much there. The Sims puts out torps on the other side because I think it's got 3 launchers? Or is that the Mayhan I'm thinking of that's got 3? I know the Mayhan definitely does. I should know this. I've got a Sims, but apparently I've forgotten how many launchers it has. Because the Mayhan's got 2 on each side and then 1 centre line, and I can't remember if the Sims is the same. It might be that Sims only put out 1 launcher earlier on and I wasn't paying attention. But anyhow, the Shiratsu is also dead. He got gunned down by the Sims' allies. So it's gone from 3 to 1 to 1 versus 1. But, well, this guy's not going to avoid these torps at this range. So, even though he's lost a little bit of health in the process, he's basically immediately driven into cover because he's got this smoke to work with and the islands blocking the enemy ships. So, that's 1 Sims down at the cost of 2 destroyers, which is not a great trade, but most importantly, for the purposes of this replay, Darnith is still left alive. Now, rather than pop out the other side and go all the way around, which would be rather time-consuming, he decides to take the slightly more risky route of, well, basically doing a 3-point turn so he can come back down the way he's gone. Now that Nuremberg there is, yeah, he's not going to last very long. That's quite a lot of enemy ships. So if Darnith gets caught out here, he's not got a lot of allies left on this side. In fact, there's only 2 cruisers. The rest of the team are all pushing around the other side. And this map, with standard games, it can be a bit like this. You'll get the majority of one team going one side and the majority of the enemy team going the other. And it always seems to, like, it very rarely seems to be like the blobs meet head on. So that's exactly what's happening. We've got a kind of a yin and yang thing going on. So the question is, who decides to turn around to deal with the enemy team first? Is it going to be enemy ships on this side, turning to defend their own cap? Because there are a couple that are defending on the other side. Or are his teammates going to come back and try and defend on this side? So he smokes up. He's actually managed a couple of, well, one torpedo there. But having smoked up, I mean, he's in danger of running aground. He's trying to get away. The thing is, though, he's running through the smoke so fast that he's getting air spotted. So he's actually taking a bit more damage there, which is unfortunate. So his engine's damaged temporarily, although he's got very sensibly the last stand skill. Is it last stand? I can't remember. The one that keeps your engine and steering and whatever working, even if it's at a reduced capacity. So he is able to limp away, but it means that the enemies are going to be potentially gaining on him a little bit. So this seems a bit risky, but the smoke is basically blocking the line of vision to all of these enemies here, so he really is fine to open fire. But the firepower on this is not exactly anything to write home about, so you might scratch their paintwork slightly, but otherwise he's not going to seriously inconvenience them. So they're pushing rather heavily on this side, it looks like. The Bismarck has gone all the way around the north of the islands on the D line and is now pushing down this side. So Darnith can reasonably expect to bump into this guy fairly soon. And if this is a secondary build Bismarck, that's not something you want to meet in your bottom tier destroyer. So he really is going to have to try and be stealthy. And then this happens. So much for that plan. Yes, the Bismarck, which is not a slow ship. It's only about 3 knots slower than the Hatsuharu. He has popped out rather closer than I think Darnith was counting on. So the only saving grace right now is that because the Bismarck is relatively bow on, and that's an island, none of well, not many rather of the secondaries are going to be able to open up on him. Whereas, of course, if he was broadside, there would be a much bigger hail of incoming fire right now. But even so, it's a bit risky because, you know, the Bismarck's main guns still function. There is that German battleship dispersion to contend with for that particular player anyway, so that works in Darnith's favour. And of course the guy's not going to want to turn to give broadside because Darnith can put out torpedoes. And even though he was keeping relatively bow on, I don't know if this guy's got hydro because he actually did a really poor job of avoiding those. Now this was relatively close range, but even so, when you're that close to a destroyer, you can make a good guess from their behaviour as to when they've dropped the torpedoes, and then that tells you what kind of evasive manoeuvres you need to take. So, a couple more hits. Darnith is rather down on health, but it gets into the lee of this island just in time for the Bismarck's shells to be eaten by it. So that's a bit of time. It's bought him some time, basically. The Dobbs about to come back. He's actually going to make a guess that the Bismarck is going to turn in, which is a fairly reasonable guess. There's an enemy Akatsuki around here. And there's also that York further back. But of the other ships that were around here, they've either kind of stayed around E7, E8, or have actively gone back to press further west and try and defend their cap. Because of Darnith's own team, well, they really have successfully pressed that advantage. they've pushed around and are now putting serious pressure on the enemy cap. In fact, there's a Sims actually in the enemy cap. So the situation that is, you know, in Darnith's face right now could be a lot worse. There could be more enemy ships here, but fortunately his team were able to push around. They didn't just stall, which happens sometimes. So one more hit into the Bismarck, who's now flooding, which is very useful. I think it was only one hit, and there was a bit of a delay with getting that torpedo into him. So if it was a longer stretch with the damage control, there's a chance the Bismarck might flood out, but I don't think he will. He does also, though, have the Akatsuki and the York in pursuit as well, and it's only the Fiji of his teammates that are left alive down here, is what I'm vaguely fumbling for. So all Darnith really needs to do is stay alive, because either his team is going to cap or else they'll come back and mop up these remaining enemies. Now that Fiji is unlikely to live for very much longer. He's hopefully going to avoid getting a torpedo up the butt. Yeah, there we go. The torp's just running out of range. But with the amount of firepower that's directed his way, even though it's only 2 enemy ships versus 1, you know, one of those 2 ships is a battleship and you're in a light cruiser, well, when you've got that level of health left, your life expectancy is not going to be good. So Darnith has split his drop a bit here. He took a guess with the first drop, and then he's dropping once again on the Bismarck, who has the biggest guns and who is worth the most points with his second salvo of torpedoes. So he should, if the Bismarck holds course, be able to take this guy out, and that will just leave the Akatsuki. So there goes the Fiji, who with his parting final salvo actually takes out the Akatsuki, which is very useful. It means Darnith doesn't have to go hunting for this guy. And, well, there we go. Only one was required, so that just leaves the York, who's actually the last enemy ship left alive. So, at this point, yeah, it's either a case of he's... Oh, there we go, another hit. Very nice. That was pretty good. Either his team is going to cap or he's going to get to kill this York. And, well, I'll let you place your bets as to which it's going to be, but there's not a lot of time left in this game either way. It is rather close to the end now. So, this is risky, but I guess he had a look and saw that the York's guns were pointed the other way and decided to open fire anyway. So, with this map being how it is, I mean, it's not like the distance from one cap to the other isn't huge, and it's more than enough for one of the allied battleships up in the enemy cap to finish off that York, thus bringing the game to a close. So we ended that match, considering it was bottom tier, with a rather healthy score. It was over 100,000 damage done, 2 kills, 1700 base XP, and that was enough for the top of the team. By far the top of the team. Interestingly enough, the Fiji that was down here as well, also defending, because this was a very defensive game. He was second place on the team. And in some ways, the Japanese destroyers do rather well in these circumstances, when you've got people trying to push into your position, and you can lay down torpedoes in their path. But it can also be a rather tricky situation to deal with, especially when you've got multiple enemies, you know, larger numbers of enemies pushing down on your position, and there's not a lot of backup available. So all in all, I think he handled that rather well, especially considering that rather scary moment when the Bismarck came round the corner at 5 kilometers range. So on to the last game. This time it's not quite so bottom tier. It is technically a tier 7 game, but there's only, I think, 1 per team, and the other ships are a mix of tier 6 and tier 5. And this time round we've got La Squalo, who I don't think I've shown a replay for before on the channel. Not in the supporter spotlight series anyway. I don't know if I have for Darnith either, but I have a feeling I might have done actually at some point in the past. I'm pretty sure, yeah, actually no, I think I have for Darnith. So he's not entirely a new name, but he's not someone we've had a lot of replays featured from. But La Squalo, this is definitely his first featured game. So, funny little anecdote, I was actually playing some Warships matches earlier today and ran into him on the enemy team. And I know there's a smaller player base for Warships than there is in World of Tanks, but it's still a little unlikely even when things like that happen. The odds are definitely against it. So, the Königsberg, Tier 5 light German cruiser, most notable for its rear turret arrangement. Now, it's got, unlike the Soviet cruisers and some of the other American cruisers, it's one turret in the front, and a lot of them have two in the front and one in the back. In this case round, it's two in the back. And the two in the back are a bit special because they can rotate all the way around, and you're going to miss that when you get to the Nuremberg, because it's really very useful when you're maneuvering, and instead of your turrets having to go all the way around the back of the ship, they can just follow you through the turn. So the Königsberg, if the matchmaking wasn't so bad, would still be a really nice ship to play, but when you're down tiered, your fragility is going to play against you. However, because it's German, it gets that nice German AP, and it also, of course, has pretty decent hydro, although the range isn't anything like as good at tier 5 as it is at higher tiers. So, lots of broadside cruiser targets. He's just racking up the citadels. I mean, this is ridiculous. He's deleting ships left, right and centre here. So that's 2 enemy cruisers down already. He's taken a bit of damage himself, but thanks to the angles that those rear turrets are able to fire at and the fact they could just follow through the turn, overall, that was reasonably comfortable, and with the enemy broadsiding cruisers, he was able to just rack up an easy 40k damage. So now on to the HE. This is a slightly longer range target, this König. And although the HE isn't particularly good, for this kind of range you probably want to use it. One of the other advantages of the German cruisers is that the ranges are generally quite good. Not as good as the Soviet cruisers, which are far better at spamming HE at range overall, but the downside of the Soviet cruisers is they turn like oil tankers. They are not maneuverable ships, and therefore it's very hard to dodge incoming fire, which is a very relevant thing to say right now. So he takes 1, which isn't disastrous, but it clearly was a penetrating hit. Wasn't a citadel though, which is the main thing. So let's take a moment to glance at the minimap. There's a König of their own team coming up on this side. There's a pair of ships slightly to the west, an Emerald trying to contest B, and over all the way on the west where they've got 4 ships it looks like, and basically the majority of the enemy team. Those couple of ships over there are probably not going to last. The Kirov might have the speed to get away, but the Bayern, is that a Nagato? Can't quite read the minimap labels there. I think it is a Nagato and a Cleveland. They're probably not going to get away. So, what happens at this point? I mean, if we can assume those ships are going to die, it's basically going to come down to the ships of the enemy team pushing over into the middle versus the ships of this team that are left on this side pushing over into the middle. And we'll see who comes out on top, I suppose. So La Squalo just continuing to pepper the König, who is trying to hit him right back because he's the easier, squashier target to take out. But at this stage, well, I mean, his own König is pushing up, the Bayern is pushing up there as well, so there's now multiple ships firing at this König, and La Squalo is... the pressure's taken off a bit, hopefully. You know, this König will hopefully start firing at much closer targets like that Emerald, which it looks like he is. So, continuing to use the HE, I mean, this is quite an angled target. If you're close up with the German cruisers, then AP against battleships is usually reasonably valid. I tried to mash together usably, and I don't even know what I was trying to mash together actually. usually and reasonably, and I came out with a word that already exists because, of course, I did. Anyway, what was I saying? Yeah, but these days, with the IFHE skill on the German 15cm guns, the German HE in particular does gain a bit more potency than it had when Lasqualo was playing this match, which is, I think this is a 9-15 game, so still quite recent. But maybe these days, you know, he'd have done more with the HE and gotten a bit of higher damage out of it. So we skipped on ahead a little bit, and as predicted, the Kirov has made a giveaway. Well, I say as predicted, I knew what was going to happen because I've seen the replay already. But yeah, the Kirov was fast enough to make a getaway, and he's sort of got some ships in pursuit that have gone around down the south. Meanwhile, the Scharnhorst and the new mechs have just pushed straight through into the middle. The Emerald has capped B, the one that went there, but versus two battleships, he's not going to fare that well. And the other Emerald is pushing down in from the north, and at that range, he's also unlikely to do very well because he's already only at half health. So what their own battleships do is quite critical at this stage, even the König and the Bayern. And unfortunately, I'm going to slightly spoil it and say these are not the best players in the world. They're not the worst players in the world either, but it's battleship players like these that give the stereotype its substance, if you like. It's players like this that make people slightly wince when they talk about battleship drivers generally. Both of them are full health. Both of them just letting these cruisers take all of the damage and just die. And they are not getting stuck in at all. They're not using their armor. They're not using their hit points. And it's not like they're low health. They are both basically full health. They have neither of them really taken a scratch at this point. So they don't really have an excuse. They don't have a leg to stand on. So anyway, Lasqualo's taken a nasty hit himself, but manages to finish off that Scharnhorst. That's an important kill. So that just leaves the new mechs and that Mutsuki in the middle, both of whom are quite low health. That Northern Emerald, well, he has just died, but he hung on for quite a long time considering. He must have been either dodging quite well or getting lucky with misses. So the Mutsuki smokes up. He's trying to ambush the Bayern, and I think when I watched this through the first time, I was face-palming and thinking that Bayern was just going to get obliterated outright. Fortunately, however, he isn't, because it's not like this team can afford to lose any more ships. There's the Kirov, who's just been running away for most of the match. There's these two very healthy battleships, and then there's Lasqualo here, who's doing his absolute best to hang on despite being in a bottom-tier squashy cruiser. And he's actually done rather well at that so far as well. He's managed to set a fire on this new mechs, which is fantastic. He's done now approaching 90,000 damage, and he's got 4 kills. So can he get a Kraken? Now, of course, there are other enemy ships, and they are now starting to move towards B. It's taken them a while to get here. They went off on a chase to try and get that Kirov, and then they realised they weren't going to catch him because it's a Kirov and it's quite fast. Although, having said that, one of them has just finally killed the Kirov. The new mechs, with his very final shot, managed to take out the Kirov. So, what's left is an enemy Nuremberg, a York, and a very healthy Fuso. And Lasqualo was maybe not expecting these guys to push out because he pushed forward himself, and although he's trying to reverse, there we go, there's his 5th kill, there's his Kraken. It's not going to go well, it's not going to end well for him because he just can't reverse fast enough. And I think he banked on these guys not turning up at this moment. And instead they have, and he's rapidly running out of hit points. So with his dying shots, he tries to get a fire on the Fuso. We'll see if he's successful. But unfortunately, the York just catches him as he's getting into cover. So no final fire, but his final damage tally was 98,000. and he got a Kraken, which is not half bad for being bottom tier. So their team, having controlled 2 out of 3 cap points for the longest time, is reasonably ahead on points. When you look at the team list, however, it's 2 versus 2. Now, just on hit points, this ought to be a comfortable win. And I've actually sped this up. Lasqualo went into free cam mode and watched the end of this game because I imagine he was rather invested in the outcome. So we've got this Bayern who actually didn't take any torpedoes, as it turned out. I just kind of assumed he would do when I watched the replay through the first time, but no, he managed to avoid the wall, and the Koenig did as well. And so you'd think this ought to be relatively easy. I mean, these remaining enemy ships aren't playing especially well either. They're not trying to cap. And if they're not actively trying to win, I think they're just not trying to die at this point. And so to lose this on points, they'd have to really try and throw it away. And I was half expecting something ridiculous to happen, but no, I mean, if the Bayern or the Koenig had deigned to get their pixel scratched up till this point, the Bayern in particular, like, he took a lot of health, a lot of damage at the end there, but no, I mean, because they were basically both very healthy going into that, because they'd been very passive up till that point, they had the hit points to survive, and they won on the victory ticker. So, unsurprisingly, Lasqualo, by far the top of that team, 1900 base XP. The Bayern, I mean, he'd clearly done some damage, although who knows how much of that was at the end, but 3rd place on the team. The Koenig, not so much. So you can see the damage done. Quite a lot of damage to quite a lot of enemy ships, plus those 5 kills. And, unusually, perhaps for a German cruiser, 33,000 fire damage, which is not half bad. But the bulk of his damage done was still with his AP, which is perhaps not surprising. So, there we go. A bit of mid-tier warships for you, which is something that's maybe a little underrepresented overall on YouTube. You tend to see lots of high-tier ship action, but the mid and low tiers maybe get a little overshadowed. And the mid-tiers, especially these days, as I've said, it's maybe harder to get good games these days. But as Lasqualo proves, it's not impossible. So, hopefully you have enjoyed this this bevy of replays, and if you have, you can leave any comments below, you can hit the like button, you can sub to my channel if you haven't already, and, as always, stay tuned for more.